Fetal Alcohol Syndrome by Miranda Garles. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a condition in a child that results from alcohol exposure during the mother's pregnancy. It causes brain damage and growth problems. Fetal alcohol syndrome varies from child to child, and the effects are irreversible. No research indicates how much alcohol can be consumed without hurting the child. Therefore, it is said to stay away from alcohol if you are pregnant or trying to get pregnant or may think you are pregnant. There is a range of consequences from drinking alcohol during pregnancy, and it is called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. There is a range because not all signs and symptoms are present in all children with the disorder. Alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder is on the spectrum. Within this disorder, there is intellectual disabilities or behavioral and learning problems. Alcohol-related birth defects is another on the spectrum. This is where there are physical defects caused by drinking. Partial fetal alcohol syndrome is another disorder on the spectrum. This is where there is a presence of some signs of fetal alcohol syndrome, but not all the criteria is met for being called fetal alcohol syndrome. Fetal alcohol syndrome is the most severe end of the disorders. This includes both neurodevelopmental disorder and birth defects caused by drinking alcohol while pregnant. Fetal alcohol syndrome has multiple signs and symptoms, and these may include physical defects, intellectual or cognitive disabilities, and social and behavioral issues. The severities vary from child to child. Some physical defects a child may have include distinctive facial features, including wide-set eyes, a thin upper lip, a short upturned nose, and a smooth surface between the nose and upper lip. Deformities of joints, limbs, and fingers, slow physical growth before and after birth, vision difficulties or hearing problems, small head circumference and brain size, and heart defects and problems with kidneys and bones. Problems with the brain and central nervous system include poor coordination or balance, intellectual disability, ID, learning disorder, LD, or developmental delay. Poor memory, trouble with attention and with processing information, difficulty with reasoning and problem solving, difficulty identifying consequences of choice, poor judgment, hyperactivity, and mood changes. Social and behavioral issues include difficulty in school, trouble getting along with others, poor social skills, trouble adapting to change or switching from one task to another, problems with behaviors and impulse control, poor concept of time, and problems staying on task, and difficulty planning or working toward a goal. Even though some of these are characteristics to look for, there are other complications that could arise from fetal alcohol syndrome later on in life, and these can include ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, conduct order, which can include aggression, breaking of rules and laws, and inappropriate school conduct, mental health disorders, inappropriate sexual behaviors, and alcohol and drug misuse is at higher risk. Fetal alcohol syndrome cannot be diagnosed before the baby is born. The only thing doctors can do is assess the health of the mother and baby during the pregnancy. After the baby is born, the doctor can watch for signs in the initial weeks, months, and years of life. Although diagnosing fetal alcohol syndrome requires a thorough assessment. When assessing the child, the doctor will look at physical appearances, distinguishing features, physical growth, and developmental brain growth and development, cognitive ability, learning and language development, social and behavioral problems, and health issues. A child with fetal alcohol syndrome, as well as a family, will need many support services and resources starting at birth throughout the child's life. A great way to start is to find support from professionals, counselors, and other families who have experiences with fetal alcohol syndrome. By starting out with this, parents are able to talk to others into what to expect in the future and how to prepare for it. When starting school, the child will have access to interventional services. This may include a team that consists of a special education teacher, a speech therapist, physical and occupational therapist, and a psychologist. These teams will help throughout your child's school by helping them with walking, talking, social skills, and help with keeping learning and behavioral issues under control and at a minimum. As a teacher, you will also have access to the special education teacher, the speech therapist, physical and occupational therapist, and the psychologist. Being able to work side by side with all these teams will help better equip the student with the least restrictive environment and help the student learn to their maximum capacity. As a teacher, you want to be actively involved and help out students in any way possible. When becoming a teacher and there is a child with fetal alcohol syndrome coming into a class, in order to become the most effective teacher, start by collecting information on them. You can ask the question, what are the students' learning strengths and needs? You can do this by checking the student's history to look at any information already collected on that particular student. This could include a summary of conferences, summary of recommendations from the psychologist, speech and language pathologist, and occupational therapists, medical reports, family and medical background, and their previous individualized education plan, or an IEP. Another way to find out information is by asking the student informally. Students with fetal alcohol syndrome can provide useful tips on their strengths and needs. The last way to collect information on the student is by observing the student. When observing the student, answer questions regarding many topics that provide success in the classroom. These questions could look like, what part of the day appears to be the most productive for this student, or the least productive? Which class activities does the student enjoy most? Can these activities be altered with those he or she finds more difficult? To what extent is the student able to follow classroom routines independently? In what areas will modifications be required? How does the student interact with his or her peers in the classroom? By answering these questions, many accommodations and modifications in instructional strategies can be made and put into action as soon as possible to help the student succeed in the classroom. After going through the first step, ask the next question. What does the student need to achieve success in the classroom? As a teacher, consult with other professionals that have worked with the student, special education teachers, counselors, psychologists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists. After talking with others, set out a plan and carry it out. Step 3 is where you reevaluate your plan and you ask the question, is the student achieving success in the classroom? If the plan is working, ask, is the student comfortable working with the supports provided? How do the parents feel about the plan? Can these supports be paired or alternated with others to lengthen the period of effectiveness? If the plan is not working, ask yourself, can the plan be adjusted to be more successful? Should the learning assistant or resource teacher be involved in program planning for the student? Should the student be referred to the school-based team? If step 3 concludes that in-class intervention did not work, step 4 is to make a referral. The teacher must consult the parents and decide what is the best next step for the student, whether that is being referred to a special education teacher, a learning assistant teacher, a resource teacher, or a speech and language pathologist / occupational therapist. If the best placement for the student is the general education classroom, as a teacher, there are many ways to help the student succeed. It starts by making sure their attention is there before starting anything. When giving instructions, make sure to use gestures, voice variations, and pictures. Students with fetal alcohol syndrome are visual learners. Also use repetition throughout the day and the days that follow. It can reinforce learning. When trying to get students with fetal alcohol syndrome to comprehend and interact with the lesson, you could sing rules, directions, and steps to help them remember and follow along. Utilize all the senses whenever possible, as multisensory learning strengthens the information and provides for more than one way to recall. Always teach at the student's developmental level, not their age level. Not all students learn at the same pace or at the same learning level as their peers. Because of this, they must be taught at their developmental level. When working with a student with fetal alcohol syndrome, give direct and immediate feedback on good and bad behavior. By giving feedback on good behavior, it helps build up confidence. Also encouraging positive self-talk will back up the building of confidence. Here's a short video on some educational considerations in the classroom.
For many families rearing children with fetal alcohol syndrome, they say that the single biggest challenge is the school system, because the school is set up developmentally to expect certain behaviors and certain understandings at each stage. The child with fetal alcohol syndrome is, no matter what their IQ, is going to socially and emotionally, developmentally be below that chronological age all the way along.
Children who are prenatally exposed to alcohol are easily distracted.
Yellow. Sundays are always going to be what color?
Whether it's by noises, changes, activity, or other students, they may have trouble focusing or staying on task. Some feel more secure if they're in motion much of the time. They talk a lot, tend to pester others, and have a poor understanding of personal boundaries. As a result of these behaviors, children with FAS are often dismissed as troublemakers or behavior problems.
Excuse me, aren't you supposed to be over here? Thank you.
Children with fetal alcohol often make the same mistake over and over and over. And so that looks like non-compliance, or may even look like oppositional defiant disorder. But for a child with fetal alcohol syndrome, it's not non-compliance, it's non-competence.
As director of the Fetal Alcohol Education Program at Boston University School of Medicine, Barbara Morse has helped health professionals, parents, and teachers understand the learning disability associated with FAS.
Thanks a lot. You're welcome. Have a great time.
Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow.
Some teachers will say that the IQ score is confusing to them. They see a child who has a particular IQ score and they expect a certain level of learning and behavior based on that. And that doesn't work for children with fetal alcohol syndrome. Their intelligence is often intelligence they can't use effectively. So you may see a child who knows something on Monday, doesn't know it on Wednesday, and by Friday they seem to have it back again. And that's very frustrating. Teachers need to recognize this is part of the disability of fetal alcohol syndrome, that inability to retrieve information, rather than an inability for this teacher to teach well.
Children affected by fetal alcohol exposure are usually friendly, eager to please, and often try hard to succeed at school.
1, 2, 3, 4. Excellent.
Although they sometimes do well in the early grades, they often have problems as they get older, and the schoolwork becomes more abstract. They may be regarded as lazy or stubborn. Without a diagnosis of FAS, teachers often believe the child is smarter than he actually is, and assume the child just needs to buckle down and try harder.
While we often think that FAS is a unique disability in certain ways, and it's important to recognize it, I think it's also important to recognize teachers already know a lot about how to help children like those with fetal alcohol syndrome. That techniques that work for a child with an auditory learning disability may also work for a child with fetal alcohol syndrome. The techniques that help a child who has a sensory integration disorder will certainly help a child who has fetal alcohol syndrome. And teachers can rely on their own expertise in what they already know about how to help other children to help these kids as well. Teachers working with families and coming together to figure out what's effective for every child play a pivotal role in helping these children have a bright future.
The best practices for supporting a child with fetal alcohol syndrome begin with establishing the child's area of strengths and weaknesses. When doing this, you can obtain information needed to help put together a behavioral plan for the child. A behavioral plan can be used for lots of feedback and a reward system. Patience and empathy, a stable environment, and consistency with rules and expectations are the basis for working with children with fetal alcohol syndrome. The fact that there is no cure makes the teacher's support and understanding even more crucial. Even though there are so many different exceptionalities in this world, each one has its own significance and importance. Different people around the world are affected and must find ways to successfully live and learn. Fetal alcohol syndrome is no different. Even though some people may have this exceptionality, doesn't mean that they cannot succeed and be successful in this world. They just have to come up with ways in which they can succeed. Some may need additional help, but it does not stop them from learning and living. These are some of the resources that I used. One that I found very helpful was the Mayo Clinic staff. The article was Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. It gave a lot of different information that was very, very helpful. Another one that was awesome was the one by Johnson, Tamblin, Williams, and Wright, the special education. That gave a lot of different information on how to have your classroom set up and the different kind of things that you can do in your classroom to help students succeed and have a good school environment with everything.